Today we are talking about how to use JWT to secure an API and how to implement JWT access in a website or web application that needs to access a secure API. To, to help you understand this better, I have created two repositories. One of them is a API repository, which is just the API that we're trying to access, and the other is our web application where we need to access this API. So they would be on two different domains, and that would help you to see how to implement it on both sides. Now let's go to the VS Code. We see this is the project, this is the API project, and the other one is our web application. To show you how the whole thing works before looking into the code, this is our web application or website. This is very simple. There's not much to it. There is a button that tries to access the API, and the API that we access is available here at this URL. You see if we try to access this in the browser, it just gives an error because the authorization header is not available in the GET request that browser sends, and the API requires that. Now, if we come here and try to access API, the same thing happens, and you would see that there's an error message in this place where we show the result of the API endpoint. Now, if we log in here using the admin test, click the login, it says that we are now logged in, and what has happened behind the scene is that this request, login request, has gone to the server. Our server of our application server has seen that we have access. If the credentials are correct, then he has created two tokens. One is the access token, which is returned in the JSON, and it is in the memory right now. And the other one is a refresh token, which has been set in a cookie, in a HTTP only cookie by the server. So it is also available on this page. If we open the dev tools bar and go to the application and see here, you see that there is a refresh token there. Now, what is the refresh token and access token? What is the difference between them? The access token, we only use it for 15 seconds or so. It's in the memory and you can access the API with it. But as soon as it expires or as soon as you do a refresh and the memory is clean, then you cannot access it with access token. You need the refresh token. And the refresh token is valid for a longer time. You can put it for 1 week, 1 month, several months. And the thing is that this refresh token can be used as credential actually, so that when it sends the refresh token, you can get new tokens. And then you have again the access token and a new refresh token, and then you can use the access token again. I have put the duration of the access token quite short, I think 15 seconds, and just for our testing purposes. Now, let's try again here. You see that now I refreshed the page so that the memory is clean. There is no access token in the memory, and if I access the API now, it should return the results. Why? Because we have the refresh token. Now, if I remove the refresh token from here, so there is no token, and I refresh, that there is also no access token in the memory, and I try the access API, and you see that it doesn't work now. If I get the new access token, okay, and access the API, it works right now. And if I refresh it, even though there is no access token, it would still work again, yeah, because we have the refresh token. If I log out, the code would remove the cookie and would clean the cache in the memory, so there is no access token in the memory, and the access API will not work again. That's all there is to it. Now let's take a look at the code and see how this is implemented. The tech stack that I have used is Node.js. I don't have any server. Everything is serverless. I use the Vercel Edge network for as a serverless function, serverless APIs, and you can also use Express or any other server that you like to implement this. First, we take a look at the API. The API is pretty simple. There is not much to it. There is one file which receives the request to the API, and this when you call the endpoint, this function is called, and what it does is it reads a data JSON from a disk, parse it as a JSON. This is the data JSON. It's just a JSON file with some codes, and it reads it from the disk, parse it with JSON.parse into a JSON, and returns the JSON in the response. Now, since this API is coming from another domain, we need to make sure that there are no coarse errors in browser. Normally, browser doesn't allow you to access a different domain through JavaScript. So we in Vercel we set a JSON file in the root called vercel.json, and we define the headers that we need for all the requests. And these headers, this kind of setting, it says that the source is that means that if the request comes to this API, the responses should have these headers, and these are the access control headers. Generally, we just say that give access to these APIs. Doesn't matter from which domain it's coming. Now that's it. That's the API, and that's the course part. The middleware is actually what the action happens. So this middleware JS in the root is the one that is run on the server. This is a function that is run on the server before the request reaches the endpoint. And what happens here is that we verify if the token, because we verify if the token is valid, because the API itself has no notion of if the request is authenticated, if the user is authenticated or not. API just returns the response in the endpoint. So the middleware detects, so it checks the request. And how it works is that it gets this request. You see this is the function that is run when the request comes. The first thing we do is that we check if there is an authorization header, because the access token is sent through the authorization header in the request. And if this header exists, then we verify the token. If it doesn't exist, we just return an error, 401 error, unauthorized. Now, before doing all these things, checking for the verification of the token, we need to add a little piece here. This is because browser automatically send a pre-flight request, and the type of this request is option. That's how we know that this is a pre-flight. So this code snippet only deals with the pre-flight request. So here we return access control allow headers to that every header can be allowed. Why do we do this? Because when we are sending a request through the JavaScript to a third-party domain, and we change the headers, we put a header like, for example, authorization, the browser wants to know if these kind of headers are allowed by the server to access. And that's exactly what we are doing here. So if you don't do this, then you get some coarse errors in your browser dev tools, and you can see what you have to do. Okay, after that, so the pre-flight succeeds, and then the main request is submitted, and then with the authorization header. So we check if the authorization header exists. The authorization header looks something like this. It is the authorization. The type of the JWT authorization is bearer type, and then there is a space, and then there is the token. And this is the JWT token. As you see, there is three parts that are separated by dots. One part, the second part is the payload, the first part is the header, and the last part is the I think is the password or your key. Now let's go back to the middleware. So we split this string so that you get only the access token, the second part, because with the bearer we don't need that, and we need a secret to get the secret that we can verify this token. The secret is in the environment. I have put just a simple secret, doesn't matter. You can actually use either secret or you can use private public key, which is the better, more secure method is using private and public keys. But here for us, it's just this string. This is the same secret that the token was created with. And we need this secret now to verify by calling the JWT verify. The library that I use is called Jose. Jose is a very good library. There are two libraries. One is JSON Web Token library and the NPM, and the other one is Jose. And Jose has one advantage to the JSON Web Token, that it runs on many runtimes. Because of I'm running this on the edge and I don't have Node.js APIs are not available. I could not use JSON Web Token there. That's why I use Jose. And Jose has two methods. One is to verify the JWT that we need, two methods that we use. One is to sign a token and create a token. Here we don't need to create tokens, we need to verify. That's why we use JWT verify here. And here we check the verification. This is async function. That's why we have used await here, and get a payload. The thing is that if the access token is not valid, here the script would throw an error. That's why we have put it inside the try and catch. So if it's not valid, if the response is the process is that it's not valid and throws an error, then we return a 401 error, which is unauthorized. This could happen if the access token has expired or is invalid, is wrong access token, or there is maybe no access token. Yeah. And if the verifies, the response that it returns is the payload. The payload could have anything that you need, like some information that you have put into the token. We talk about that later. Now, if this payload is returned and the JWT verify was successful, we just call the next, which is the method in the Vercel Edge runtime that lets the request continue to reach the endpoint, which is the API endpoint. That's all to it here for this part of the API. As we said, the second part of this tutorial, or whatever you call it, is about how to implement JWT inside our website or web application. Here we need to create the tokens and then send the token with the request to the API. Let's take a look at the files here. I might clean up here. Okay. This is our web application. We have here just one index.html page that corresponds to what you see on this page. As you see here, we have three buttons. One is to access the API, one is to log out, and one is to log in. For these ones, the only script we load here is the main.js. So we open this main.js, and there is really not much going on here. We set up 3 event listeners, one for the login, which calls the login function, one for the logout, which calls the logout function, and one is the API button, which tries to access the API. And the only thing that we have here, we create a state variable where we want to keep the access token in the memory. By default, this is undefined, and This is the endpoint that we are trying to connect to or call. So let's say the first step. The first step is that we do actually log in. So when we log in, the login script is here. Let's take a look at that. So we just here, it's pretty simple here. We just get the data from the form. This is the data, and then we send it as a post in the body of the in the body of the request to the server. The path, let's take a look. The index.html. The path is also called API login. Don't mistake this API folder that we have here. This has nothing to do with the API that we are trying to call. This is all the backend functionality. I put it here inside the API because that's how the server is set up to work. So the login form sends a request, post request with the credentials, username, and password to this file under API folder login.js. And here actually there's not much going on. We just compare this username and password with the username password that we have in our environment variable, and if it passes, if they are valid, then we set tokens. Now let's take a look at the set tokens function. The set token is imported from this function. Let's take a look, see what happens here. The set token gets a secret, which is the same secret that we used to verify in the API project, and this is the same here in the environment variable. Then it creates two tokens, one access token and one refresh token, using the method sign JWT, which comes from the JWT library. This method gets a payload. This is the payload that we put in our JWT token. I just put the username. You can put anything you like, and nothing that is risky, because this, as you notice, there is no anything you put in the access token could be actually accessed on the client side. So don't put anything that is secure, like a password, inside the JWT. Now then there's this header, which is an algorithm that is being used in the setting up the JWT token. Then the important one is the expiration time. That is 15 seconds. You can put it to anything you like, and then sign it with this secret that we have. Same goes for refresh token. And the only thing is that the expiration time for the refresh token is longer, so it's 1 week, for example. You can put it to anything. And after these two tokens are created, then what we do is that we set the refresh token in the cookie. So the set cookie function puts the refresh token as a HTTP only cookie in response. And that means HTTP only means that it won't be available to JavaScript. So JavaScript cannot access this refresh token in any way. And the access token itself, we return it in the JSON, in the response, in the body of the response as a JSON. Here I'm returning refresh token as well. We don't need it. It's just for our testing to see, to get the value of the refresh token in here in the IDE. I will show it later. But you just need to return the token, access token, in the response body. That's how we set it. The function how to set cookie is not really that relevant to this. You in different languages or programs, you put it probably differently, but we can take a fast look at it. This set cookie, actually, if you see this function, it just gets the response and refresh token, and it depends. If it's for the serverless, I use one method, and for the, if I'm using Express, for example, server, I use a different method. And in the set cookie serverless, you see that this what it happens is that I got this header, set the set-cookie header. This is the header that should be in response. And then I put the refresh token as the name of the cookie and the value, and define here that it's HTTP only. And if I put a secure, if it's for the production, we put a secure so that cookie only transmitted through HTTPS and not over the HTTP protocol. That's it. Okay, let's take a look back. So this is how the login works. And now that we saw how login works, let's see the next one is to see the logout is also very simple. So as soon as you log out, we just hit the send the get request, and we set the access token in the state to undefined. So access token is not available in the application anymore. And then we send the request, a get request to the logout path in the backend. And what is important here to set the cache control to no cache, because otherwise this I have noticed that in Chrome, for example, this only runs one time, and in the next ones it doesn't go to the server, so you don't get the code in the backend to run, and then it doesn't remove the cookie anymore. And so this is the important cache control. And yeah, what we get as JSON is not important actually. So what happens in the logout? The logout is just that we just clear the cookie. So to clear the cookie, actually, we have to put the expires to a date in the past. So this put it to the epoch time 1970, so that the cookie gets removed by the browser when it has already expired, and send a message back. That's it. So that's what the logout. And the part that we call the API is actually the important one. So let's take a look at the call API function. So the call API function, what it does is that it first checks if the access token exists in the memory. If the access token, there is no access token, then it requests new access token. So request new access token, and that's when does this happen is that because, for example, let's say that if you have refreshed the browser in a single page app and there is no access token has gone away, or you have come again later to this your app and you have no access token, you only have the refresh token. So when the access token is not found, then we send a request to get new tokens, and request new tokens here, as you see, what does it does is that it send the get request to the fetch tokens API and then get the tokens. Now let's say what fetch tokens in the backend does. The fetch token, when it's called, it says await is refresh token valid. So first it verifies is the refresh token. So because any request that we send, the refresh token in the cookie would be sent automatically. So that's why we didn't put it in the API that when we were calling this. So in this get request, sorry, here in this fetch, we actually don't need to say anything. We just send the get request, but the cookie would still be submitted. And here it checks if it gets the cookie from it gets a refresh token from the cookie. If it doesn't exist, so it returns false, and then return false, and here return the 401 unauthorized error. If it is refresh token exists in the cookie, then it verifies it, again using JWT verify, and if it's true, returns true. Now, when refresh token exists and it's valid, then the set tokens function is called again, and set tokens again set the tokens, exactly what happens after we log in to the app. So it's the same functionality. Now, this is when this token doesn't exist. If the token exists, access token exists, then this function, this snippet doesn't run, and we come here. So what we need is we want to call the API using the access token. And this is the API endpoint. The method is get here. It could be post or anything. And we don't need to set anything for course because the default mode is course for the fetch request. And the important part is that now we have to put the access token in the header. And the header, how we define it, is the authorizations. And the value is bearer plus space and then the access token. And this request, when it's sent to the endpoint, which is in a different domain, returns to us the results of the endpoint when the access token is valid. And you get this. If it's not, you get an error in the JSON, and then you can show the error message, and then you can, for example, it could be that access token has expired or for some other reasons. And then you can request for new tokens here. And this request new tokens, again, we already looked at it, runs the same thing. Send the request for the tokens to get new tokens, and then call API again. If the token was valid, we get the JSON back, and then we show it inside the API box. We stringify the JSON and then show it there. That's all that there is to it. Yeah. And in the backend, take a look. Yes, I think we went through all of the stuff. So one more time, we can go over this. So, actually what we could do is that I have set up here the API test. Here we could see that what happens here. We have a request for the authenticate. API authenticate, we don't have it. I think it's changed. This is a login actually. So here, if we send this request to the login function in the backend with the username and password, correct username and password, let's see what happens. It should return actually the 2 tokens to us. I have to save it, I guess. Okay, the response is 200, and you see that it returned the access token and refresh token in the body, exactly as we said. We only needed access token, and that's why I said I have put the refresh token just as for testing purposes. Now, if I get the access token from here and paste it here, this is the request to the external API. This is an API that is live. If we put this access token here and then send the request, we should get the response. Oh, why did we get error? One more time. Could it be 30 seconds has passed? 15 seconds. Okay, then I have to be faster. So do it one more time. Here, see if I do it fast enough. Send request. For some reason it's slow here. Send request. Okay, access token. And then here I put it in the request, and then I send the request. Okay, maybe I have to add. Maybe I have to. Okay, one thing we can do is that because maybe this expires too fast. So what do? I can use the refresh token actually. Try one more time. Make sure that I don't get anything wrong here. Error here. And unauthorized. It says JWT expired. I think 50 seconds was too short. I could immediately increase this. Let me see. This is our public. So we go to the API, and when we set the, we create the tokens. Where do we create tokens? Actually, we create the tokens here in the, wait a second, we created tokens here in fetch tokens, right, in the library. So here I would put this to, okay, I put it to 30 seconds. Okay, now try it again. Okay, access token. Let's see. Now send request. You see now that we got the responses back. So it was too short, 15 seconds, because by the time the response comes and then goes again, yeah. So this was, you see that with the access token, we can call the API here directly, get the codes, responses back. Here we can test the login, and here is that we can use refresh token to get tokens again. So if I send the request here in the login API, by calling the login API, okay, now if I get the refresh token here and I put it here in a cookie, so refresh token in a cookie, if I send this request, not to authenticate, to fetch tokens, this has not been updated, it should get me the tokens again. Yes, so you see, that means that exactly we can get the tokens either by entering credentials into the login, get the tokens back, or we can get the tokens by sending just the refresh token through the cookie to the server. Both of these return access and refresh tokens, which actually in the body we only use the access token. We don't need the refresh token, that is server sets it in the cookie. So that's it, and that's how it works. And this application now has access to external API through the refresh, and here you can see that again through the refresh. Waiting, that's what gets error comes. Actually, we have the refresh token, so probably it would now. Let me change this once again. Access API, it should work. Oh, let me see. Is the no cookie there? There's no cookie. Okay, so we need to log in first. Okay, now is the cookie. So we try it now. Okay, it's working. We remove cookie. Again, delete, and then we log out or log out as well to make sure that the access token doesn't exist in the memory, and you click and it says that it's unique token. That was it. Thank you.